Won't you pray with me? God of grace and mercy, peace and love, we are so grateful to be in your presence this morning. We're grateful for the opportunity to worship you and to hear from you. God, we ask that the meditation of my lips and of all of our hearts be pleasing in your sight, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. It's wonderful that my daughter gets to go to preschool every week. What's not so wonderful is when she brings home the preschool plague. It's not contagious. Everybody in my house has either had it or managed to avoid it, but we are in like week 2 of it, so I promise. I'm also going to wear a mask when you're close enough to me that you might catch it, but it's not contagious. It just sounds really awful. So I appreciate your patience as we work through it together this morning. As you heard during our children's message, it is Trinity Sunday, and sometimes the inclination of a pastor is to stand up here and give all kinds of cute little metaphors like body wash about what Trinity means. But friends, all of those metaphors fall short because for us, the idea of Trinity is just a way to think about how we connect with God rather than a way to understand God. So let's start at the beginning. Our Genesis text this morning was supposed to be all of chapter 1 and the beginning of chapter 2, but that's a lot, and so I didn't want to make Mike stand up here and read all of Genesis chapter 1 and the beginning of chapter 2, especially since it's something that we all know, right? It's something that we've heard since we were small. We could probably list the 7 days of creation if we stood here and tried for long enough. So I had Mike read the part at the end where it talks about God creating us in God's image. But I will refer to some other things as we get into the meat of the sermon this morning. It's interesting, though, that the lectionary chooses this as the Hebrew text for Trinity, right? Do we see that the 3-in-1 God is at work even in creation? Do we experience something of that completeness, of that wholeness as we work our way through this familiar account? Well, let's look a little closer. Genesis 1 says that when time began, God was. When creation came to be, God was the cause. The water here is the incubator, the womb of God, out of which creation is birthed. The wind of God swept over the face of the waters, according to the NRSV. The Spirit of God was hovering over the waters, according to the NIV. Eugene Peterson in the Message says, God's Spirit brooded like a bird above the watery abyss. I think that's the one I connect with the most. Brooded like a hen tending the eggs before they hatch. Like a mother waiting for the time to give birth. I think that analogy is why I connect the most with the brooding, because with all 3 of them, there was a period of great anticipation and waiting and just ready for it to happen. God tends the creation. God calls it forth. But wait. Is it the Spirit that is the creative force of God, or the Word? The Spirit brooded. The Word was spoken. And there was. The prologue to the Gospel of John tells us the Word was that force. John chapter 1, verse 3, all things came into being through him. And without him, not one thing came into being. It was the Word that brought forth light. And then it was the Word that pronounced it good. We sometimes forget that part of the story. We wrestle over creation, we argue about theories, but we sometimes forget the goodness. The goodness that is a part of all that God has created. Or maybe we have forgotten what the word good means. God saw that it was good, but the light was not yet complete. The sun hadn't been made yet in the story. The moon and the lesser lights of the stars were still on the drawing board. But it was good. I had occasion this morning to remind both my husband and my oldest daughter that as being human, we are always learning. We are always learning. Goodness must mean something other than finished. It must mean something other than perfect. As we define the term perfect, perhaps it means born of God. Perhaps it means in process, growing, moving on toward perfection, on the way to order out of chaos. This morning, the house was a little chaotic as Elba is in the range of listening sometimes and not other times, and it really kind of grates on my husband's nerves. And so there was a little bit of frustration in our house this morning, and it was a little bit of chaotic. But because good means, or good could mean, a process of growing and moving toward perfection, I was able to remind them both, as I mentioned, that we're always learning. And we are still good even in the process of learning. Order out of chaos. Light in the midst of darkness. And the light was good. And there was morning. When you didn't think there could be another one, there is morning. Thanks be to God. Genesis chapter 1 verse 6 says, "And God said, let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." In this verse, the waters represent chaos, the unknown and the unknowing. In the ancient world, sending sailors to sea was a traumatic experience. The ritual of sending was like a funeral, and the return like a resurrection. Because when a sailor left, who knows what was going to happen out there? Who knows whether those who are sent will be seen again? Now, when we go on the waters, it's a little tamer, and so we have less of a fear, but we think that that's how it is. Until the storm surge reminds us that there is power. Until the threat of the rising waters troubles our easy confidence. What will our coastlines look like in 50 years, in 100? By separating the waters, God is staking a claim as Lord of chaos and order, saying, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. Our God is in control. Genesis chapter 1, verses 19 through 13, or verses 9 through 13. Then God said, let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed and fruit, trees of every kind on earth that bear fruit with the seed in it. And it was so. Let the earth put forth. Let the earth put forth. God enlists the aid of creation in the act of creating. God invites partnership. Think about it. God is saying, get on board. Though God is perfectly capable of creating on God's own, out of nothing, God instead chooses to invite participation. Let the earth bring forth. And it was good. And there was morning. It goes on. The Genesis story stands in opposition to other creation stories. Many have pointed to the similarities and believe that this might diminish our story somehow. But Genesis makes its claim regardless. God is the only deity. Notice that the sun and moon are not named in this story. In other tales, these are gods themselves, but not in Genesis. God is the only power. The lights rule, but only because God put them there, and it was good. The story goes on, of course, for 66 books and for thousands of years. It goes on until today, where we find ourselves in the midst of chaos, attempting to throw off order. It goes on until the day when we find ourselves forgetting that there is a purpose to our existence. It goes on to the story, the mornings. It goes on. That's the blessing here. It was evening and it was morning, a new day, another day. When you were sure that your failures meant the sun would never shine again, it crawls over the horizon even so. God set all in motion and invited us to be a part. Whatever dominion meant, it now must mean caring for. It must mean stewarding. We participate in God's act of creation by making sure that it lasts as long as possible. Whatever subduing meant, it now must mean partnering with the earth to bring forth enough to feed the teeming billions. And why? Why are we called to participate in this act? Why are we privileged or burdened with an extra responsibility or promise? Because we are made in the image of God. And we are given the story, so we know. We know that everything there is did not come about because of us. We know that our main mode of existence is one of gratitude. We know that all we are and all we have belongs to the one who said, "Let there be light." And that's where things get interesting, which is a coded word for messy or complicated, because we are invited to participate in God's ever-continuing act of creation. We are called to join in. We are called to go. What a loaded word go is. It's time to go. Let's go. Can we go? Are you ready to go? Questions, statements, promises, pleading. Go has lots of moods, lots of attitudes. It's hard to deny the excitement that is inherent in the word go. It just drips with possibilities and with newness. Go into a new world, a new reality, a new way of being. Who could say no to the word go? Well, let me tell you, a 2-year-old can very easily say no to the word go, but that's a different story for a different time. The horizons are calling, and the world is yours. Just go. Go and see, go and live, go and be. A new chapter is a new beginning, but also a continuation of the story so far. Go, of course, we want to go. But with everything that is loaded, there is the other side too. To go, you have to leave. To move toward a new tomorrow is sometimes to leave a comfortable, or even not so comfortable, but maybe familiar yesterday. To embrace the call is to go, is to turn your back on stay. It is to leave behind those who have become family, even as you stride into an uncertain hope, a possible joy. In our gospel lesson this morning, we stand on a mountain with the remaining disciples as they wait for whatever might be coming next. Mountains in the Bible are more than simply geologic formations. They are theologic signposts. Something significant is going to happen. You can tell there's a mountain. It's a dead giveaway, or rather a living one. Mountains are alive. But not just with the sound of music. No, mountains are alive with the presence and power of God. Standing on this mountain, the disciples' lives were about to change forever. In fact, the whole world was about to change forever. Not that they knew it at the time, but they knew that they heard that word, go. There's some very important information in these verses from the end of Matthew's Gospels. We want to get right to the crux of it, to the go, the Great Commission. And that's certainly understandable. That's where the work is. That's where the call is. We are part of a denomination that takes as its mission the understanding that we are to be making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And we say it just like that, with capitals and emphasis. You can hear it in how we say it. We say it with fervor, with passion. We say it, let's admit it, with a bit of desperation. We're losing our grip on what we have been and what we are, and we are uncertain about what will become. So we cling tightly to the Great Commission for the salvation of the church, of the denomination. And we hold it so tightly that we squeeze the life out of it. It has become our weapon, our bludgeon, to force a resurrection of the churches we were once upon a time in our memory, if not in fact. It comes down to how we hear the word go. All authority has been given to me, says Jesus, to drive this point home, to sear it into their souls and so far into our souls, so that they would bow to the King and scuttle out of the mountainous throne room ready to do his bidding, by hook or by crook. Go, make disciples, whether they want to be made or not. Baptize them, even if you have to hold them under the water until they stop squirming. Get them in, get them done. Then teach them to obey. Obey. Put them in their place, under the thumb, under the heel. Make them good, make them pure, make them right, when all seem to want is wrong. Get her done. It's hard to hear those words, isn't it? I hope so. It was hard to say them. But the truth is, that is the attitude of many in the faith historically and today. The Great Commission can be a license to hate. It can be a sword to wield, to put down, to look down, and come down on those who don't measure up. Go run over the world until you've made it into the image that is palatable to us. And if some get hurt in the process, well, better than to miss the urgency of the call to go. It's in there, they say. That steel, that iron, don't mess with God. All authority has been given to me. There is no other way. So you'd better shape up. Get in line, and if you don't have the right credentials, we don't want you. We won't let you in. Go. Matthew says, with what sounds like a certain amount of sad honesty, that it was 11 disciples who gathered on that mountain. Did you notice? Maybe he hoped you wouldn't. 11, they were broken, incomplete. One of them turned, betrayed them, threw it all back in their faces, and pushed to make something happen. that wasn't going to happen, or pulled down the curtains to reveal the smoke and mirrors of the whole enterprise. At least that must have been what he thought. Oh, I know, John says it was the enemy, that he was infected, diseased, can't blame him, he was a cancer that was cut out. Let's point the finger and let him take the blame. It absolves us. Our betrayal can remain hidden that way. Our weakness, our failings pale before his. But Matthew doesn't seem interested in blame, just in truth. 11 disciples gathered on that mountain, carrying their wounds, their failures, their disappointments, and their fears. Even when Jesus appeared, he says, Matthew says, they all worshipped, but some doubted. Really? The resurrected Christ stood before them, about to ascend into heaven and take his place at the right hand of Almighty God, and some doubted? Still, even on the mountaintop? We aren't told what they doubted. Him, themselves, the mission that was about to be handed to them like a hot coal from a fire, all of the above, or something else entirely? Who knows? We don't. Except that we do, because we have them too. We have those doubts, that sense of inadequacy, that feeling that maybe we shouldn't force someone else to believe what isn't within them to believe. Maybe we should just keep it to ourselves. This faith thing. Keep it quiet. Don't make waves. Don't disturb the neighbors. Live and let live. That's a better motto than go anyway. But then maybe we've got the tone wrong. Maybe it isn't about triumphalism, but about joy. Not about being right, but about being whole. Maybe Jesus meant that all that happened was just shown that his way, his life, his parabolic teaching were indeed the better way to be. And that if we were thinking right, we couldn't keep it to ourselves if we tried. It will leak out of us as we live in the world as fully alive human beings. So, says Jesus, live intentionally. Live outwardly. When Jesus says, make disciples, he doesn't imagine an anvil upon which we pound them into shape. Instead, he imagines a relationship. He says, go spend time with people, value them, learn from them, know them, help them, tell them what makes you the fully alive person that you are. It isn't a course you take to get a diploma. It's a way of living that we are always growing into, like creation itself. The goodness is found in the process. Make disciples as you are being made into a disciple. Baptize them. That sounds formal, like a ritual, like joining up, like signing on the dotted line, right? Well, sure, but maybe more. Baptize means cleansing, washing. Maybe Jesus meant less of a rite of the church and more of a process of being made clean. Peeling off the understandings of self-centered culture, scraping away the stuff-centric life, and immersing ourselves in the Creator God, the Redeemer Jesus, and the Sustainer Spirit. Give them something else, Jesus was saying, to live by, to be defined by. Give them me, he said, with that trademark 1,000-watt smile, and teach. Oh yes, teach them obedience. But not by breaking their will, though not by beatings and repetitions, but by passion and joy and encouragement. Go, he said to them and to us. Go and trust that he knows how hard that is. that to go forward is to leave something behind, that to accept the call to go is to live with uncertainty and a sense of what if and why not. It is to embrace the goodness of God in spite of all of those doubts, trusting that the new place, the new world, is a mountain of potential and power in the presence of God. And maybe the real call is to live into go rather than to jump and run to meet some deadline, some quota. Because we have known failure. Go is harder to hear, harder but not impossible. Because with God, all things are possible, even go. Friends, this week I want to invite you to go and live as if Jesus is with you, to go and be outward so that people will know Jesus because they have met you. Go. Go with compassion, go with joy, go with peace, go with love, and go with God. May it be so. Amen.